Well, good evening, everybody. It is actually 6:30, so we'll start the meeting. Welcome to this new season of Manydown Overview Committees. We've moved from our bedrooms and offices straight to the council chamber, which is a bit formal, I'm afraid, but I'm told we'd be back in the committee suite as soon as possible, so you're not all so distant from me. I like to feel that this is sort of more of a roundtable discussion than a formal meeting. Anyway, I have to start with something very formal, and that's to tell you all about the fire evacuation proceedings. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening, therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. So that's that done. Welcome. Welcome to the new councillors. I know it's Councillor McIntyre and Councillor Lee, who's with us always anyway, so it's nice to see you this side of the table. So first of all, apologies for absence and substitutions. I understand that Councillor Freeman sends her apologies because she has another meeting that she can't get out of. I don't think there are any others as far as I can see. No. Next, the first thing we have to do at this new meeting of the new season is to appoint a vice chair of this committee. I'd like to nominate myself, Councillor Gavin James, to continue in that role if he's happy to do so. And there's a seconder next to you. Is everybody agreed? Councillor James, would you like to move? Sorry, you have to keep an eye on things. You have to keep an eye on me. Right, while he's moving, are there any declarations of interest on any items in the agenda? No? I haven't been informed of any urgent matters. Item 5, minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of February 2022, which is contained in your papers. Are we agreed that I can sign these minutes as accurate, as an accurate record? Yes, thank you very much. I will do that in a minute. So we come to the main agenda item, which is to receive an update on where we are with Manydown North and South. And that's at item 6 on the agenda pack, starting on page 11. So I'm assuming that Councillor Isett is going to introduce this report for us. Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. And yes, I'm happy to do that. Good evening, councillors, and particularly a warm welcome to the new councillors. So this report gives an update on progress on Manydown North, which is including the planning framework, land drawdown, and ongoing work on the overarching and phase 1 business plans. Also, the evolution of thinking on the countryside park, and also the work that's being done to ensure that the proposals and the work being done on Manydown North communicated to residents and interested parties. Part 2 is Manydown South, and that the report covers the work that's ongoing in relation to seeking an allocation under the local plan update for Manydown South as part of the Regulation 18 submission in the summer or autumn of this year, and in particular the thinking that's going on in relation to climate change, ecology, landscape, green infrastructure and utilities. It's important to make the distinction now between Manydown North and Manydown South. Manydown North, we have appointed a private sector partner in Urban and Civic and Wellcome Trust, and they are charged with delivering the project. And so our role and the officer's role alongside me is one of as a sort of client role, making sure that we're happy with the work that is ongoing, and obviously as a 50-50 partner alongside Hampshire County Council, making sure that our interests continue to be met as the experts in Urban and Civic get on with bringing forward the development of Manydown North. In contrast, Manydown South is at a much earlier stage. It's held jointly 50-50 by Hampshire County Council and Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council, and we are very much at the stage of seeking an allocation under the local plan update for Southern Manydown, working alongside the other major landowner in the south of Manydown, the Society of Merchant Venturers. So if we revert to Manydown North, we're going to hear from the project director of Urban and Civic this evening, who will take us through the progress they've been making since we last met. That will particularly, I think, focus on the work that's going on with the local planning authority in relation to the site-wise strategies and frameworks. This is important work in relation to getting the planning of Manydown North as we would want, particularly in terms of the countryside park development brief, the urban design framework and vision statement, the drainage statement, the construction strategy, the ecological mitigation and management strategy, the phasing and delivery strategy, the estate management plan, the travel plan and the heritage plan. That will be followed in due course by the submission of the key phase documents, which will look at the uses and quantum of buildings on individual phases and the applicable design codes and guides, and also a delivery plan. And that will then be followed by the detailed scheme design, including reserve matters for individual phases. As I say, the development manager will provide an update on that process tonight. Is that right, David? Good. Well, that's reassuring. Right, we're also, I hope, going to hear about the countryside park.
We are indeed.
Good. Okay, as you know, this is an important benefit that we're going to realise with the development of Manydown North, not just for the people who are going to live on Manydown North and all the residents nearby in Rookstown and Winkleby and so forth, but as an attractive resource for the borough as a whole, both in terms of education, health and recreation. The Urban and Civic have commissioned a consultancy team, Planet, to develop proposals, so we'll hear more about that. Turning to Manydown North delivery update, we are continuing to operate at the moment under the interim business plan. That is to be superseded by the overarching business plan and phase one business plans once they're finalised. That work is still ongoing. We are making headway, or at least Urban and Civic are, in terms of finalising their proposals for the OBP and the financial model, which we need to get in place in order to begin the detailed discussions with the Manydown company to agree the price of the land that we're going to be drawing down and how much land we are going to be drawing down. So we'll get an update from David on that. That piece of work, the overarching business plan and the land drawdown, are obviously critical stages in taking possession of the land at Manydown North, and you will be receiving a confidential briefing session on that. Is that still time for July?
We need to get that in before it goes to Cabinet, yes.
Good, okay, fine. Yeah, that does seem likely, yes. Okay.
That's the challenge.
Right, okay. All right, fine, good. All right. Just on the land drawdown, as colleagues will know, we as two councils entered into a 999-year lease with the Manydown company, and that document provides how we can then draw down the land. That is subject to a number of conditions, and one of the most important of which is the Achieving Outline Planning Permission, which we've now got. So we are in a position to trigger the transfer of the land to the councils. Turning to Manydown South, we are working on the emerging master plan. That has been amended in response to the feedback we've received from the local planning authority. We've also been taking note, as we should do, about the latest national policy and legislation, including the Environment Act of 2021, and UK government announcements, including mandatory biodiversity net gain targets to become law in England in 2023, and government proposals for new homes and buildings to have EV charging points. That work on the emerging master plan involves engagement with both the local planning authority and Hampshire County Council Strategic Transport, and also, as I've said earlier, collaborative working with the Society of Merchant Venturers. We also continue to take note of the vision for land north of the M3 at Junction 7, which was the Council's vision for joined-up planning and delivery of infrastructure, employment opportunities and better facilities in the area, including a new hospital, a potential new hospital in that location. So those dialogues and that work is ongoing. The next stage in relation to the local plan update is the draft local plan regulation 18 stage, as you all know, and that will set out the council's preferred strategy for accommodating future growth. The local planning authority has issued its draft local plan policies, which includes Southern Manydown as a shortlisted site for allocation. The LPA considers that Southern Manydown provides an opportunity to deliver a strategic scale sustainable development that will provide a significant proportion of the borough's housing needs within the new plan period. And the scale of development will allow the creation of an infrastructure-rich, healthy and net zero carbon new community, which as someone representing the landowner, I fully endorse. We're looking at a quantum of development on Southern Manydown of a minimum of 7,500 homes, with 2,200 planned for the period to 2039. We will work on the regulation submission to develop the master plan strategy documents, which will cover climate change, cultural heritage, deliverability, ecology, economics, landscape and green infrastructure, transport and movement, utilities and water. Just a word on finance. The costs relating to the planning, promotion and delivery of Manydown are jointly agreed and funded between the two councils, with a proportion of all reasonable land promotion costs for both Manydown and Manydown North and Manydown South being recoverable as part of the land value calculation when we draw the land down from the Manydown company. On the 28th of February 2022, the Council approved the medium-term financial strategy for the next 5 years, which included the budget for the Manydown programme, and you've got the estimated costs there in table 7.22. There are currently no forecast variances. Just to draw to an end, a bit of very good news, which demonstrates both the significance of Manydown as a whole, as a major housing, new housing community, the level of support that we're and recognition from government, we applied for funding in December 2021, and in May of this year it was announced that 300,000 of revenue grant and 360,000 of infrastructure grant funding had been awarded to the two councils from the Garden Towns Capacity Fund. That's going to be important in helping us ensure that the infrastructure that's put in place is appropriate for the scale of development that is being proposed at Manydown. And just on capital investment, the report makes reference to the summary of the loans made by the council into the respective Manydown joint venture LLPs to the end of the last financial year and the current budget forecast for 22-23. There's also a capital programme for 22-23, which includes £12.5 million for land purchase. To end, it's important that our residents are continued to be kept informed, and councillors for that matter, and so there is an evolving communications and engagement plan which is being led in relation to Manydown North by our private sector partners, and I note that in March there was a newsletter that was circulated to local residents, and also in March that 50 residents attended a drop-in event to discuss the construction access to Manydown North. And I'm sure that there'll be more engagement and communication with residents in due course. On southern Manydown, an engagement and communications plan is being developed following the Regulation 18 stage of the local plan update. And that, Chairman, is the end of my briefing to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Could you just turn off your so I can hear people? Thank you. Now, does anybody have any questions for Councillor Isaac on the report he's just given us? Yes, Councillor Katecha.
It's regarding Manydown South. Previously, we were told we weren't doing anything with the merchant venture people. May I ask you, is there going to be any building on their land as well? Are we buying it from them? And also, my concern is we're not listening to residents, because I've been told more than, I can't even count how many times. They want 7,500 houses in Manydown South. So who's benefiting from this? The residents don't feel like they are in that side of town. I just wanted to find out who's given the go-ahead and why, and also who's benefiting, because it doesn't seem like we're listening to our residents.
Can I start with the second question? It's not been allocated yet, it's a proposal, so it's got to go through local plan update process, and so we'll have to prove its case, and that actually it's needed, and that it meets all the tests that you would expect before it can be allocated under a rigorous local plan process. So, as speaking not as the local planning authority, but as the portfolio holder responsible for, charged with delivering the development of homes at Manydown South, which, remember, we acquired as a council many years ago, and the High Court told us that we had a responsibility to bring it forward for development. So that's one point to bear in mind. And I think the other thing is that I think it's generally acknowledged that there is a shortage of housing, and if you look at the housing that does get built, it generally gets occupied, and so I think that there's a very strong case to be made for the fact that we need to build our homes for our growing population, but the important thing from my perspective is, and from our team, and also from those working with us, is that they're going to be well planned, well built homes, and they minimise their ecological and environmental impact. And the first question I didn't quite catch, Councillor.
Yeah, I was talking about the merchant ventures land. You said you're doing some work with the merchant. Is it merchant? Yeah, so Society of Merchant Ventures. Sorry. What sort of discussions are you having? Are you having discussions to buy their land as well and sort of build houses on there?
I'm going to invite the project manager to answer that, but they are major landholders, and it makes a lot of sense to work with them. So there is a memorandum of understanding how we work with them, and there will obviously be a lot of benefits if we are working together in terms of where roads go in future, where schools go, and where district centres and so forth in Manydown South. So I think they're proving to be good partners at the moment, and we would expect to continue with our work together to make the submission collectively for Manydown South in relation to the local plan update, but it's separate ownerships. But I'll invite Andrew to add anything or subtract anything.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. No, I think you summed that up pretty well in terms of the relationship we have with the Society of Merchant Ventures. It's one of working in collaboration through a memorandum of understanding at the moment. There is no intention to acquire their land, that they have their thoughts and views about what they will seek to do under the local plan with regards to the delivery of development on their land. So at this point in time, it's about how we work together to deliver infrastructure that supports that scale of development over a fairly long period of time. So accepting that, you know, the numbers appear high when you look at it in the first instance, this is not something that's a 10-year program. You're looking probably 30, 40-year horizon in terms of seeing development come forward. So ultimately, this is planning for the future and getting the planning right, and the concerns that people have expressed around infrastructure. This means that we can get the infrastructure right early on, rather than having a piecemeal approach to development and failing to actually address the question around infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your questions. Councillor Lee, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to try and tie this into 3.2.1 around the phasing and delivery strategy, but it actually relates to the rather big bombshell that was announced at EPH recently, that the secondary school wasn't going to be or was likely to be on South Manydown instead of North Manydown. Can we confirm what those sorts of plans are going forward, and whether that is the case?
Not sure I describe it as a bombshell. It was an opinion from a county councillor, I think, wasn't it? I'm not like members of the EPH committee. I was rather surprised at what Councillor Reid was saying, because it seems to me that we have worked over many years with the Education Authority, Hampshire County Council. It was Hampshire County Council that required, as part of Section 106, that there should be land set aside for a secondary school. Like Councillor Laura James, I would have assumed that not only with 3,500 new homes on Manydown North, but also all the residents in Winklebury and Rookstown who might be interested in sending their children to a new school on Manydown North, that actually there would be quite a sufficient catchment for Manydown North. But they are the Educational Authority, and therefore there might be a case for asking them to clarify this. I would expect they'd be happy to do so, because they've had a long time to think about this, and it's part of the Section 106. It's a substantial piece of land that is being allocated for a secondary school. I don't, Andrew, if I may ask Andrew, do you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. I think, as you summed up, it's within the terms of the Section 106 that we spent a long time negotiating with Hampshire County Council to provide a site on Manydown North for the provision of a secondary school. So, you know, that hasn't changed as far as we're aware as landowner stroke developer. I think, as Councillor Isaac said, I think it'd be prudent for officers within the Education Authority to substantiate that discussion and allow members then to consider what that impact might be, if that is the case that officers have expressed. But as far as I'm aware, that hasn't been expressed to us as of yet in terms of future development. And indeed, as per the previous question, Manydown South hasn't been allocated yet, so it's premature to consider whether or not a secondary school could be provided on that land. So there clearly is a dialogue to be had, but you know, our assumptions are that that proceeds as is what's been presented in the outline planning application, and as you know, working with Urban and Civic, we will take that forward.
So can we take it that you will ask for clarification so that somebody's got to ask the question, haven't they?
Well, I think you could.
I'm very happy to.
Good.
I'll ask it. Thank you. Have you got another question there, Councillor Lee?
Yeah, I do, Chair. Thank you. So on 3.2.3, it talks about the information brought forward in a key phase should conform to parameter plans, etc., etc. Can I assume then that the officers will be double checking that they do conform to the original application or the outline application, the documents that sat within that, and that the two match up before they get presented to us and to Cabinet?
I would certainly hope so, because it seems important that they should be, both in terms of our role as joint partners with Urban and Civic, who are leading on the work, and also clearly it will be sieved as part of the local plan process. So I'm sure there's going to be some very good checking of the two all correspond.
So will we also get sight of those so that we can cross-reference as well?
I mean, we don't generally share. There's discussion going on with the local planning authority in terms of what information they may put out into the public arena. We seek to do a briefing into this committee in terms of those documents, and ideally, as they're coming together, then we can provide that briefing so that you can offer, scrutinise and offer comments back. How we will share those out, we will just discuss. Look at how best to do that, because some of those documents, A, are very technical, and B, run to many pages. So it's actually understanding the technical work behind it, and the reasons why some of the proposals or decisions will have been made. But ultimately, they have to follow what was set out in the outline planning application, so that those elements can be discharged by the local planning authority. So I think they're the decision makers, but we, from the landowning side and from the client side, will want to ensure that they still meet the objectives of the project that we set out in the beginning.
Yeah, I get the question. I get the point of the question. Your point you're making, and we want to help you do your job, and therefore, as a landowner, I'm sure that we would be happy to. At the appropriate time, when we've sort of finalised it ourselves, that we'd be happy to share that information with you.
Have you got another question, or is that it for now? For now.
Sorry, Chair, yes. It just relates to the funding that was on the 725 on page 21. So it talks about an allocation of a sum of funds for access junctions to the north of the South Manydown area. which is great. I think, brilliant that we've managed to secure some funding. Has similar, and you'll have to excuse my kind of, obviously I'm new to the game, has there been similar funding for the North Manydown site to allow for the provision of access junctions in particular?
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Just stepping back, the Garden Town Capacity Fund money was set up to support garden towns such as Manydown in their early technical work. So the council, or jointly the council with Hampshire, bid for funding, and the resources have funded technical work to support the proposals that have come forward. So the funding isn't there to actually deliver the junctions, it's there to support the early technical work which we undertook on Manydown North. Similarly, the funding is now being directed to Manydown South because that's where the parameters of that funding operate. So we don't put it into the planning work as is now, that the funding for Manydown North is governed through a different funding stream that will be supported through the development vehicle.
But we've had funding in the past from government.
Yes,
for studies.
Funding for studies. So funding for studies in the North has been already funded, and if you separately and offline we can take you through that, so that just to show you what we've received and what's been reported into this committee. So I can summarise that for you without a problem.
Thank you. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Just a general question. You've been talking about infrastructure and we're now talking Manydown South as well as North, bringing it all together in the master plan. How are we doing with the rapid transit system, the rapid transport system? Have the county come up with anything yet? It seems quite key, but we're all waiting with bated breath on that one.
I think you are more likely to be up to date on that than me.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. I can only offer the sort of a view from a landowner perspective in the dialogue that we've had with the County Council with respect to the MRT that is likely or potentially to run through Manydown South and Southern Manydown. So we have had a number of conversations, are aware of a number of studies that have been undertaken by the County Council, but as yet we've not seen an output that actually demonstrates how that will run through Manydown South. As a landowner and putting together the master plan and the vision around the master plan, we have taken a view that in order to achieve sustainable transport and active modes through that development to minimise the amount of car traffic on the surrounding network, that having an MRT or a bus route, a fast bus route through the centre of Manydown South is appropriate, and that's our thinking has been put in place for that master plan. That has been discussed and well received by the County Council, but as yet we've not seen the borough-wide strategy which the LPA and the Strategic Highway Authority should be working together on. So again, that's really probably to understand the borough-wide would be through EPH committee to see the extent of the current position on the MRT route.
So just supplementary if I may to clarify, so what you're saying is we kind of got a feel for what we want to do within Manydown, so we can get to the edges of Manydown quite quickly. But after that, it's down to us to find out from EPH, through EPH, through the county, how it's sort of going to be a joined up theory, or are we kind of trying to take part in helping mould what that is for Basingstoke, given that Manydown has to interface as opposed to just get to the boundaries, if you see what I mean.
I mean, we are interfacing, so how it connects, how Manydown South and Southern Manydown connects into the wider network, then we are looking at that and very much part of that discussion. I think it's not for this committee to be able to scrutinise that part of all of the network, but certainly to scrutinise how we are looking at it and how we seek to inform that from a landowner perspective. And that's quite crucial through the local plan process and the delivery of Southern Manydown. But the context of the MRT route and strategy will be firmly embedded within the update to the local plan, and that is held by EPH and will be considered by them as part of the transport strategy for the borough, and how that links with the county council.
Yeah, I think as both SMV and ourselves as major developers with proposals for major development in southern Manydown, where we're expecting that there's going to need to be a public transport and transport strategy, which we will be contributing to, and but the lead party in this is clearly the Highways Authority, which is Hampshire County Council. So we are attentive to the work that they are doing and contributing to it, and of course there's this funding on infrastructure studies is hopefully is going to sort of help with that work, but clearly we're rapidly approaching the point where Regulation 18 is going to come forward, and so I think the questions you're raising, Councillor, are important.
Councillor Compton-Burnett.
Thank you. I've always been very heartened to hear that we're building a community of people, not just buildings, and that the intention from the start has been that there will be a community building available to use before the first house has been built. Please could you confirm that that is still the intention?
I think that would be better directed to our delivery partner rather than me answering that, because they are the delivery partner, as it were. So I think, could I suggest that's either answered now by the project director or chairman? It can be saved for when.
Shall we wait until we hear from them and then we can ask that question again, so they can be prepared for it? Okay, thank you. Councillor Kotecha, did you put your hand up? Yeah.
I don't know if I'm getting a little bit confused here. So are we saying that the new hospital depends on if Manydown South is going to go ahead? Because I was under the impression that that site has been put on site anyway for the new hospital.
Didn't quite catch what you said at the end there.
Sorry, I thought that site was already put on side for the hospital to be built near Junction 7, even if Manydown South wasn't there.
Yeah. Well, I think permission in the past has been given to what was it called? Critical care unit, but that has been superseded now, and North Hampshire Hospital Trust are considering where a new hospital might go. One of the options would be close to Junction 7 of the M3. That would require land to be allocated to it, and that is something that is for discussion with the landowners in southern Manydown, particularly SMV. So the allocation of for housing and commercial uses in southern Manydown is going to be something that is already the subject of the draft local plan update, and that includes also recognition that there could be a provision in that for a new hospital, but that there's more work to be done on it.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hopefully going to read Councillor James's mind. Certainly from when I attended a mock many years ago, he asked a question around the country park and ownership. Has that been decided yet as to who will be owning the country park and managing more so?
No, and it's something we'd like to discuss with you further, and that's something that, but work is ongoing in that, and I've certainly received briefings from Urban and Civic, who are taking the lead on that, and it's something that our partners will wish to share with you. I'm not sure to what extent that will start tonight, or it will. Yes, good. Okay.
Any more questions or comments before we move on? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's very helpful. We've got one or two things to carry forward there. Obviously, there was the concern expressed over the doubt that's been mooted about whether or not there's a secondary school on Manydown North. And I will ask that question of our Education Authority and find out what they have to say. And obviously, there's been concern expressed about the layering of the planning detail to make sure that it coordinates with the outline. I think that's what you were saying, wasn't it? Councillor Lee, did I understand what your concern was, to make sure that there was coordination with the various layers of planning as they come forward? And obviously there are various questions about Manydown South, which are more to do now with the local plan at this stage. Okay, so if we can now move on, and can I invite our colleagues from Urban and Civic to give us a presentation. That's Mr. David Ainsworth and Barry Crabb and Rebecca. Thank you. Over to you.
It's the right-hand button, I realise now. Thank you, Chair, and thank you again for welcoming us back to provide an update directly to the committee. As you've already mentioned tonight, joined again by Barry Crabb and Rebecca Smith, colleagues on the project who hopefully are becoming fast familiar faces to everybody here. And also we should probably take the opportunity to welcome formally Councillor Lee and Councillor McIntyre to the committee. Just, if I may, before we get into the presentation, just to perhaps pick up a couple of items raised by Councillor Isaac and questions raised in the room. And also a couple of other matters. I wanted to just talk about, Barry will talk about some of the preparatory work which is going on the site at the moment, and what we're doing in the recent months to progress the project, but to really just to reinforce comments made by Councillor Isaac around this more structural elements which still are coming together, really just to sort of echo what you were saying around the progress made since we met back in February in terms of the feedback taken on the draft business plan which was presented to the partnership for sort of recommendation through to its respective members. That we've taken feedback, that feedback's being reflected. I think it'll be reflected quite quickly, so I'm quite confident that the suite of documentation required to come to the various cabinets and committees which are required in the sort of certainly the MGC's governance process will be with you shortly, and we hope in as early as July for certain authorities to be getting the approvals, and maybe a little bit later depending on the summer recess, etc. So I think that's positive headway. Also just on we're looking forward to welcoming everybody on Monday to the site. I know for some time we've been talking about bringing members of this committee to Manydown. We're really looking forward to bringing you as a group on Monday. We look forward to welcoming you to Manydown, giving you sort of a tour, bringing to life some of the 2D design which you'll see in these forums. So we're glad that date has been found. And I also understand that a date is out there for September to bring you to Rugby. That's a site called Holton, where you can see one of our schemes which is in delivery and coming up to 1,000 homes, where the approach, that master developer approach which we've talked about, you can see come in life. So I think that's close to being settled, and we look forward to welcoming you to Rugby. If I just pick up, Councillor Lees, your question around secondary education provision, and perhaps this might save the chair some legwork, we'll see. Just to clarify the position from the negotiation in the Section 106, so It was always envisaged by the Education Authority that a certain degree of time was going to be required before they'd be able to make a decision around the secondary school. There's, without getting into the details of the mechanism, there was a mechanism which essentially provides them a period of time to make that decision, and during the sort of opening of a window, they are to liaise with us and report on their expectations, where they see this happening. The Section 106 itself secures the provision, or certainly the contribution towards the cost of a 5-form of entry secondary school, and that is to mitigate the impact created by Manydown North. In addition to that, a reservation within our master planning is also there to ensure that if the Education Authority wishes not to bring forward a 5-form entry school, but instead a larger secondary school, which, as I understand, to be more efficient in terms of common and design now up to 12 forms of entry, the reservation of land is available. So the ability to bring forward a secondary school at Manydown North is there, of varying sizes, and the mechanism is there. And this is, I can't speak to Councillor Lee what was said at a meeting. I haven't heard what was said there, but as I understand it, their minds were always wanting to understand the position in the new local plan to growth in the area, and I think a window of up to about 8 to 10 years was going to be required before a backstop was reached, where a decision needed to be made about whether the secondary school was delivered on Manydown North, elsewhere, or whether alternative provision for the 5-form of entry was made. So that's my understanding of the secondary school. If I also turn to Councillor Compton-Burnett's question around community facilities, if I lead with, I think, the intent of the question first rather than the mechanics, our desire, of course, is to bring forward community facilities early in the scheme, and we're fully wedded to that idea, whether it be before the first house or otherwise. The intention is as soon as we can, in the appropriate way possible. The actual mechanics of the 106 is a temporary provision before 25 homes, a permanent provision before 450 homes, and in the process you make an election as to which you wish to do, because you can accelerate it and suggest that you'd go straight for a permanent provision rather than a temporary. But I think talking to officers in Basingstoke around the community facilities recently, in terms of the intention, it's clear that we'll be able to provide something, whether it actually be use of an office we're using, etc. So there's a space for the community, but it's very much in our desire to bring forward that permanent facility as quick as we can. I think I'll leave that there and pass over the Barry to provide a bit of an update on activity.
Do that now, don't you?
Oh, actually, that's a good point. I'll do the planning first. So again, going back to sort of main pieces of work, planning is obviously a key element. As we've discussed back in February, the outline planning consent was secured. This diagram, I think, might be familiar to many of you, setting out the tiers which Councillor Isaac comprehensively walked us through earlier on in terms of an outline consent, the site-wide frameworks, the definition of phase, and then ultimately in the orange, the detail of reserved matters. Really what I wanted to focus on today was just to give you an update on the work in green, this suite of site-wide strategies or frameworks, depending which title you use. And I think it would be useful just to talk about the purpose of that suite of documents. The outline consent, although there was a large body of information submitted in the outline process, a lot of that information is illustrative. What was actually approved with the outline was the parameter plans and I think the site access junctions in detail, and obviously the conditions in the 106. So what the site-wide strategies do really is it's an opportunity for us to take those statements around vision, around approach, around the importance of management, maintenance, and other key areas which were set out as illustrative at the outline submission stage, and really just to essentially cement them and have them approved as approved approaches to the delivery of Manydown. And that's what we've been working on over recent months, is drafting those documents, speaking to the statutory consultees and discussing the contents of this suite. It's close to its completion now, and we're hoping to submit that suite of documents probably in July. So that's So that's been the main body of the sort of planning work, and it's 11 documents. And just to dwell on a couple of those documents which are key, as Councillor Isaac alluded to earlier on, there's the urban design framework, which begins to give you detail on the approach, the design, the vision. There's also a vision document. But a particular document worth dwelling on is the Country Park Development Brief, which gives you more detail on the thinking for the park, the design, leveraging what is there, the maintenance and ownership concepts of the future. And actually later on in this presentation we have some slides we can draw out some of that detail for you. Now this time I will actually pass to Barry.
Thank you, David. On the first slide, which David neglected to say anything about, was a photograph of some children from a local school who have recently been to site, and those of you that have passed the site or live close to will have seen that there's been quite a lot of activity of late with the archaeological works, the next phase of archaeological works that we've been undertaking. Last year we trenched the whole site. That was always intended to be an initial evaluation and led us into further investigations, which, with agreement of the Hampshire County archaeologist, we've started. And we focus those around the site access junctions so that we can discharge those areas of land to enable the site access junctions to be brought forward. As part of that, and around the Winklebury Way, Roman Road site access junction, 5 or 6 Anglo-Saxon remains of buildings were found, which are very rare and incredibly early. And the photograph on the screen here is of the Basingstoke Archaeological Society, who were invited to site to come and have a look at the finds. And the one at the outset was the primary school children, who were also brought to site to have a look. And then Rebecca and the contractor went back into the classroom and gave them some history lesson on the archaeological. So there's quite a lot of work that's now concluding in terms of the investigations around the site access junctions. We intend to continue the archaeological investigation over future months and, dare I say, years, to keep ahead of the programme, to keep ahead of delivery, to work in initially key phase 1, but then spread out onto key phase 2 and 3, to de-risk the site and to make a thorough and detailed assessment of any archaeological areas of interest. We've also been ongoing with our ecology surveys. That is a ongoing and continued thing that we're investing time and effort into. There's been a great deal of detail across the site, extending to not only habitats and creatures, but also to trees, and we're currently looking at tree assessment within the Countryside Park. We are working up, on the back of that information, we're working up various applications to Natural England to start the process, the dialogue with them about works that we intend to do in the future, so that those Natural England licences are granted in good time and ahead of starting. Work's been ongoing on sites in terms of the ground investigation. As part of the outline planning application, there was a certain amount of ground investigation undertaken. It's quite standard and usual that is then developed as you get into the detailed design. So work has been ongoing in terms of ground bearing strata, in terms of understanding the chalk and the clay that's across the site, looking at infiltration, looking at potential road foundation designs and alike. So that work will continue. That also informs the cut and fill strategy for the site, where you work out the optimum levels. That's critically linked to the sustainability, because the idea is you keep as much of the material on site, if not all of the material on site. So you set your levels for your construction to optimise the cut and fill across the site. I've mentioned the drainage, the infiltration. We've been doing a number of infiltration tests to see how permeable the chalk is, to see the quality of the chalk, and to work out the best drainage strategy going forward. Work has been ongoing in terms of utilities. So whilst you won't have physically seen anything on site in terms of utilities, there's been a lot of discussion and dialogue ongoing in terms of getting contracts in place and bringing in utilities. So we've secured the provision of the electric power for the whole site since we last met. We've progressed discussions with Thames Water in terms of the foul drainage capacity. We're discussing the potable water supply, and we're also progressing discussions on the diversion of the utilities around the site. The overhead cables being one of those, and some of the utilities in the nearby roads, which in part will need to be diverted to allow the access junctions to be brought in. Work is ongoing with Hampshire Highways in terms of the site access junction designs. There's a detailed design consented through the planning application, and again it's quite typical that further work and further design reviews are undertaken with the Highways Authority, such that the detailed design, detailed drawings, curb alignments, all the safety assessments are done, and that bundle of work comes together into a legal agreement, which is termed a Section 278 agreement. Those agreements, in our experience across all of our strategic land sites, take longer than we care to admit or desire, and quite often they're a frustration because we want to get on and deliver. But I'm pleased to report that the work that we've been doing now has stand us in good stead with Hampshire Highways, and the designs have been submitted in part to them for preliminary design review. They then come back with some comments, and we progress the design through to Section 278 conclusion. So there's really good work and good progress being made on those access design junctions. And then finally, the Countryside Park, which I know David will go on and speak about, but we're also looking at the Countryside Park hub, which sits within that zone, to think about the uses and the community focus which we're hoping to deliver in that area.
Rebecca, would you like to?
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Not a good start for a communications person, not being able to work the mic. Never mind. So Barry stole on my thunder somewhat with the pictures of the archaeology, which is the kind of the jewel in my crown, was getting people on site and looking at the work that's been taking place and the discoveries that Barry mentioned. So it was lovely to get this group of school children from Chiltern School, they're year 4. We went into the classroom and we talked to them about why we do archaeology and what we'd found. And Susan, who's one of the archaeologists you can see in the orange jacket there, joined me. She had a much better hat than I do, and she brought her toolbox, which was quite exciting, I think, especially for the children. And then we talked about how we know who lived there and what we think they might have done, and how archaeology is a bit like being a detective. And then we walked to the site and we saw what had actually been going on, and the children enjoyed that. And we then had a cool walk around, as in it was less hot, not particularly trendy, but we walked up to the ancient woodland and I talked to them a bit about what we're hoping to do there. So I think it was, rather than just talking about the archaeology, we also gave them an overview of the plans for Manydown and what they will see happen on the site over their kind of the early parts of their lives. So that was a very, very rewarding day. And we also, as Barry mentioned, took slightly the other end of the demographic scale. We took the Basingstoke Archaeological and Historical Society. We had a really good turnout. 16 members came along and spent a couple of hours on site, and they really enjoyed what we'd found and asking the archaeologists about that. So that's been a really really exciting activity the last month. I've continued to liaise with the kind of local groups that I've been working with since I started in my role, so predominantly around Winklebury, Buckskin and Oakley. but also other stakeholders, including internally within the council teams, particularly the Connected Communities team and the Skills and Employabilities team. So making sure that we're engaged with them early, so that we're aligned. We have aligned objectives and supporting each other. Today I was on site with the M3 LEP, again talking about skills, particularly around green jobs and working with BCOT. And then on the comms side, Councillor Isaac kindly mentioned our initial printed newsletter, which went out to 15,000 homes in March, and that was followed up this month with our first monthly e-newsletter. So we are seeing some really good click-through rates and opening rates there, far above average at about kind of 60% for opening, which is good. We've got an engaged audience at the moment, so we want to keep them that way. So the plan is to use those newsletters to keep people informed and also encourage them to sign up to our printed newsletter and our social media channels so that we can keep people informed as and when information becomes available. And we've also been working to support local events such as the Place to Be Proud of Good Neighbour Award. We've supported Destination Basingstoke with that. Sadly, the awards had to be delayed for until next week due to some COVID illness within the team, but we're pleased to be supporting that. And also the Bee Fair in Wootton St Lawrence. I've been working with the team to support them with some of their comms on a kind of practical level, but also engaging them with the Winklebury and Manydown Community Action Group to try and bring those two communities together and encourage the Winklebury community to, hopefully, we're going to organise a kind of a walk from Winklebury through the Manydown site to the Wootton St Lawrence Bee Fair, kind of hopefully really bringing that idea of town and country together in the centre, which is Manydown. So it's been a productive few weeks. I think I've covered everything on there.
Thanks, Rebecca. So as I said earlier on, we would also sort of provide a little bit more detail on this countryside park and really just we'll do it quite quickly, a summary of some of the contents which will be available in the brief, which will come forward in due course. I think just really to sort of start with, and this is very much unashamedly, the partnership's objectives for the park, how we see it. And really, on this slide, there are four elements. There's one around, clearly this is an amenity. This is a space for the community of Basingstoke and a new community at Manydown to use. But it's also a fantastic opportunity for ecology and to drive some of our wider agendas around biodiversity net gain. So in that way, it's about striking a balance, and that's one of the objectives here, is to find a way to for these elements to work together in tandem and make sure that they're not mutually exclusive, which we don't believe we are, and that's about the design and the thought and the layout. So that's one of the first elements, making sure that we can bring them together. In addition, this park, this 250-acre countryside park, is a fantastic billboard to Manydown and a draw for potential occupiers in the future, and we very much believe that, and believe that from the very first day we came to this project back in 2016, that it was obvious that this is one of the number of unique differentiators which make Manydown a fantastic opportunity and a fantastic site. It also, particularly with the hub, it provides an opportunity, a physical opportunity to really galvanise and bring together the communities. So from our perspective, this opportunity for volunteering, for gathering, for education, for all these elements, to use that area of land to draw out all the little narratives which underpin the design, the use, the thinking. There's a great opportunity. So that's we think the park is again another tenet to delivering on the communities and partnerships elements of the scheme. And then finally, and sort of an imperative to the scheme and its sort of commercial aspects, we've always looked at the park as an opportunity for it to become self-sustaining, to treat it as an estate rather than as a liability to the project. This land currently is productive and it has a value, and we think we can develop that countryside park in a way which it's self-supporting of itself. So that's another element in our thinking about how we design it, the quality of what we put into it, the ongoing maintenance, etc., all the thinking in that when we're designing it, so that not only do we generate incomes and opportunities to reduce expenditure, but we also think about what those overheads are in the future. So those were sort of 4 objectives as we went forward. It's also just worth dwelling for a moment on sort of this sort of physical context of the park. And really there's 2 elements to probably draw out on this slide, is that if it acts as really a counterweight to the fact that most of the larger open spaces of Basingstoke currently to the east, and I know there's obviously, I think, an engagement programme at the moment about drawing and connecting these places, the Common and the Plantation and some of the more urban parks which exist on the eastern side of Basingstoke. So Manydown with 250-acre countryside park to the west is a real opportunity for the people of western Basingstoke to have an asset which they can reach by foot, by cycle, or public transport. So it's sort of balancing that green space agenda for the town. And of course, if you can see here, the North Wessex Downs, just beyond the site, that in many ways it talks to this bridging of town meets country, that this is urban edge which has a new place of a natural character with much open space within it, and then alongside it another open space in the countryside park, and beyond it the North Wessex Downs and open rural land. So it's just worth drawing on that for a moment. Just talking about what is actually currently there, I think it's really worth reminding ourselves that there's a fantastic base already, that what we're inheriting into this project is over 100 acres of existing woodland, much of it ancient woodland, and then sort of established tree lines and hedges. And although, admittedly, most of the arable elements are perhaps ecologically impoverished because they're intensively farmed, there are still very, very strong bones. There's already in itself a wonderful space which we can open up. So we're starting with a very strong base, is simply the point I'm trying to make about the park. So really just turning to the moves and the detail which is provided in terms of the principles set out in the brief. And there are 2 or 3 tenets which we wanted to pull out here. The first is about that idea of opening up what is already a really quite fantastic space, and that's around access and movement. So one of the first things we need to do, and as I say at this moment in time, this is the principles of access, and where and what form, but the detail will be coming forward with how people can get into it, how we open up in a way which means that in the early stages of development people can still access this area, because we will have to manage carefully the sort of interface of construction with this asset. So the brief will provide quite a lot of detail around this movement access, but certainly an emphasis on walking, cycling, public transport, arriving, with, of course, access by car, but making sure that in the hierarchy the car is lower and priority is given to other users moving. As I say, another piece which we wanted to really just pick on here is the hub, and the hub is very important for a number of reasons. One, because it talks to this partnerships, volunteering, education is a place which enables us to do this, but it's also, I think, critical to that self-sustaining part of the park, that in terms of, excuse the phrase, the sort of commercialisation, the monetisation of what is there, this is the greatest opportunity in which to do it. And what's been really encouraging is conversations internally with council officers in terms of urban design and open space, and their sort of agreement with the principles we've been talking to and thinking about, but also our early conversations with potential future occupiers. And we're quite encouraged and excited with some of the conversations we've already begun to have with people at a very early stage in the development, and their enthusiasm to come to Manydown and to be part of the countryside park and the wider development. I will move on shortly, but just the hub itself, the thinking being here is that it already has an established route through it, and we see maybe perhaps 2 sides, one which is facing more to the development, which is more the amenities for perhaps the community, the cafe, the farm shop, the gathering places, with the deeper into the hub, a more community-facing side of it, location for a charity, perhaps. I think you may have it here as a men's shed, which I know there are many of them in Hampshire and beyond, but also an opportunity for our first community building or a nursery. So there's a number of uses which you can bring in here to sort of activate the area throughout the day in longer times, and opportunities for food and beverage, etc., to sort of really bring this part of the development to life, but also provide a gateway and a focal point, a fulcrum for people coming in to enjoy the park. Of course, there'll be many opportunities to enter it, but it feels that this will be the notional heart of the park. And then beyond it, into it, I mean, really it's a case of either developing habitats which are there or transitioning habitats to something new. And in particular, with the ancient woodland, our view is simply around ensuring that it's safe to access, ensuring that with a larger number of people in there, that the environment they are within is a safe one. In addition, that some of the sensitivities of the ecology, that routes are established which ensure that there's a balance again between areas which are more open to people's exploration and others which are more managed, to ensure that the really quite important ecology, particularly in the ground floor of ancient woodland, is protected and maintained. Outside of the woodland, it is really where maybe the more visible changes might come, where, as I say, in the more intensively farmed arable fields, we have an opportunity to transition them. Those, and in particular, we're very keen on two aspects. One is the sort of chalk grasslands reflecting the base in which the land is on, but also one of the mitigations on the scheme has been that there's a number of rare arable flora, or weeds, as my colleague would call it, where there's an opportunity to build a reserve. And there's currently the most important reserve is Dorset Way, I believe, about 5 hectares, and we have an opportunity with the seed bank already created to meet, if not exceed, that in due course, depending on its success. So that's some of the elements there. So really just drawing that together, that's probably on a scale you might not be able to fully see, but just drawing those elements together between the heart with the hub, the access for people to move through it, and the transitioning of the habitats for the future. We're beginning to, the brief will provide a lot more detail for people to bring to life what it is we hope to do in the park. Just two more and then I will finish. On really just the timing for this. I think that what's key to the partnership and in its discussions is about bringing this forward early. Now, there will be elements, of course, which come through in time where opportunities are taken, but in terms of the first establishment of it, recognising that we already have such a strong base, it seems only right to sort of use that and seize that opportunity to actually bring forward as much of that work as we can early. So from September, I believe, the farmer tenancy ends, and that land will come back into the councils as landowners, and then there's an opportunity to essentially begin thinking about how those early transition works can commence. So our view is that ahead of for early occupations, we might be able to have done a considerable amount of work to ensure that the ecology management of the woodland, the beginning of the transition of arable lands happened, a movement network beginning to be drawn out, and ideally works in the hub beginning. That is the ambition, with a view that by the time we're meaningfully into the first phase, there is very much a countryside park which is recognisable as such. And of course, that doesn't preclude opportunities to embellish over time, to respond to opportunities as they arise, which is something we'll always be seeking to do. But it means there'll be a very strong base to commence with. And then finally, I think this is the final slide on the park, and talking to Councillor Lee's comments around, I'll break this out from ownership, governance and maintenance, management/maintenance. I think to do that in reverse order, the key here is that it's very much, it's important to the partnership, this countryside park. It is integral to our marketing of Manydown. It is something that we are paranoid over, and we will seek to control and manage for as long as we humanly can. So therefore, certainly during the delivery period in the first 10 to 15 years, our focus is on ourselves being responsible for the countryside park. That gives us sufficient time to establish the fourth objective at the beginning, to develop that self-sufficiency, for us to try some of the opportunities we have to commercialise the hub, to commercialise crops, to look at volunteering and developing capacity in the community. And we can take that time to move that forward such to the point that our aim is to reach a point where it is self-sufficient with a maintenance schedule which is ingrained, a team who's experienced, a group of employees who now manage that process, so that it is all up and running and is an estate which manages like an efficient estate at that moment in time. So once we've done that role, once we have got to that place, and I'm not saying we won't be twists and turns on the way, but some things will work and we'll try others, some things won't work, and again we'll have to address that. But there's sufficient time to, I think, get to a solution, and we are confident that we'll reach that solution. And any time that sort of, what I call sort of in perpetuity solution, after the development vehicle in 15 years perhaps is seeking to step back. Now, we haven't yet landed on a solution, but there are a number of routes and opportunities ensuring that the long-term management is there. And I think what is key and very clear in terms of principles we've set out is that the robustness and the capability of whichever body we bring together will have to be key. And through the Section 106 itself, before any transition of ownership or even responsibility, I should say, rather than ownership, or for the maintenance of that park, they are to approve it. And that approval is around ensuring capability and capacity to manage it going forward is there. So that is a solution where there's a number of things which, a number of bodies already established to do these things. There may be other bodies who don't yet exist who, by that point in time, might come forward. But one other element which I think is a core principle to the partnership is ensuring that we grow the capacity in the community so that the community can be involved in that future governance role in whatever shape we might see it. That is slightly different, I think, from ownership. Ownership where the freehold sits, I think, is almost a sort of an ancillary point. Whoever's the freeholder we can resolve in the partnership itself. I think what's key is that it's governance, and certainly governance in the short term is the partnership, and in the long term would be an appropriate body, and the maintenance is established by the partnership. And I think I'll leave that there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's really interesting and encouraging. Thank you. Questions? Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you for that. I'm intrigued as to how or what thoughts you have about integrating the park into the housing. I mean, obviously at the moment we're seeing the park, we haven't got a vision of the housing, and you may well have. So how are you going to be in the park and not see the housing? Or, well, those are the sort of things. What are you thinking of?
Thank you. So let me just begin with the sort of idea of integration then. So within what I'd call strictly the development area, obviously the red line incorporates the countryside park also, but if I exclude that for a moment and then the residual is the development site, within that area itself there is open space requirements, and there's a minimum requirement, and obviously there's no maximum upon us in terms of cap and what we can deliver. But the quantum of open space and green infrastructure which is likely to come forward is something in the order of 140 acres. So it's not dissimilar to the size of it's half the park and slightly beyond. So there is going to be a large extent of natural open spaces amongst the scheme. The site itself also has this long ribbon shape you may have seen in previous presentations, lends itself to this parcellisation either side of Main Street. And parcellisation, I mean breaking it up into housing parcels. And that is then broken by these green fingers. So these green fingers are an idea for the park to come through the development, join back into the existing boundary of Basingstoke at the appropriate points where there are opportunities for walking, cycling, green links, where there are sensible places for it to come together. Those were where the green links have been focused, and that's along the Roman Road, round to Worthing, so right along the extent. So the idea is that it really facilitates a very natural journey from existing place through a development which has a ethos of living in a park through to a park and the wider natural areas. So that's certainly how the integration idea is being drawn out. In just touching on the sort of, I think, sort of an ancillary point around its proximity to the countryside park. Well, of course, there's no denying that the development is up very close to the edge of it, in the sense that the boundary treatment is an element which are being discussed, and for the more sensitive areas, there is also policy already around buffers and the role of those buffers, and that's a level of detail we hope to get into in the phase design which is ahead of us, and we look forward to having those conversations, because I think there are ways of ensuring that that interface works well.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. Probably lead with the good bit first, and it's actually more a point towards Rebecca and her communication, and I found her very open and responsive to a lot of the stuff that we've been kind of raising with her, and in fact so much so lurking in the background of community groups and responding before we'd even had chance to kind of fire off an email making a complaint about something, which was really good, and hopefully we can continue that going forward, because the residents do feel that they are kept out of the loop on a lot of things, and I'm not going to teach you to suck eggs in your own job. Communication is key with those residents. I wanted to actually ask around the public rights of way. You were talking about kind of the access and movement into the country park. There's a number of already existing public rights of way. I'm a runner. I run around those woods, those fields. How much of that are you planning on keeping and intact as to what they are today? And also, is there scope to improve the connection between what there is on the countryside park side and the other side of that road? It may be a quiet road, but actually the access out of it is on, the main access at the moment is on that road on the corner, the bend, and then you join another footpath just after that, which takes you all the way down towards Kingsclear. And I'd like to see how that would link together so that we can have that from urban to all the way to Kingsclear and the countryside out that side as well.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. As a keen runner myself, I'm also quite keen to ensure that we both maintain and improve the existing prow on the site. You'll understand, I'm sure, that prow is treated much the same way as public highways, Section 278 agreements. They're devilishly difficult to close, divert, change. So we are very much embracing and working with those existing prow routes through the site. And there will be times where we need to divert for safety when we're doing something in that area, but by and large they will be maintained and improved. And furthermore, we look to introduce kind of secondary and tertiary paths, not only just within the park but throughout the whole development, through the green fingers David was mentioning earlier, so that true connectivity from, whether that be from residents existing in Winklebury or in Rooksdown or those in Oakley, can actually access and come to, through and beyond Manydown. In terms of off-site routes, we've got Section 106 obligations to provide contributions to Hampshire Highways, or Hampshire County, should I say, to improve some of those off-site public rights of way. And the detail of what those improvements constitute is work in progress. But there's a sum of money at various triggers through the development that we need to provide so that those connections can be improved. Yeah.
So just to add to sort of really to echo and reinforce one or two of the points around the off-site improvements. those contributions are very early in the project because it was important to us, as you say, to not stop at the red line, to ensure that that transition between various levels of ability, whether you are effectively, your mobility means you're moving only in the development area, or whether you're able to go further into the country park, or whether you're like yourselves and unlike me, able to go even further into the countryside. That Manydown, we call it the Manydown loop, but we, as you've highlighted, we identified a route which joins the park and goes north towards Kingsclear and before looping back round towards the south of Manydown, which provides a sort of range of routes for people to enjoy. And I think just recognising, I think the point you're making, that some of the existing Prowl network doesn't immediately tie together. Of course, in the design of the country park, we're able to add the additional routes to make sure that it joins more neatly than perhaps it does at present.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, especially Rebecca. I think it's fascinating to discover that you found buildings on that site, because the drama we went through to build on a greenfield site, and all along, actually, we're just reclaiming it for townsfolk. I wish we'd known. It would have solved a lot of hassle. If you find any placards, stop the Oakley building or something, because that village probably came along after, but there we go. Good to see. Please capture as much of that history. I think it's fascinating. I know when we built Hatch Warren, again, it was a greenfield site, very controversial. When they actually built Hatch Warren and did the same work, they found that had been a village previously in Hatch Warren, so it wasn't a greenfield site either. They then found some In Touch magazines. Apparently Conservatives ran the village for 20 years and everyone left. I may have made that last bit up, but there we go. You can do that history. So thank you very much for that. And fantastic to see children on the site as well, because people who generally are a little bit anti-development always say, why are you building these houses? Who are you building them for? Well, actually, those children are the answer. And so it's really good to have them on site, and every opportunity to drag the schools over there and show them what's going on, whether they're going to become the builders of the future, or whether it's to understand, obviously, the more exciting, pretty stuff like the trees and stuff. Really important to get them involved, because hopefully we're going to build a generation of non-NIMBYs who will accept that sometimes you have to build homes for the future. So really pleased to see them on site. Word of caution was, I think, the Park Hub. You often see these things where we make promises, oh, it's going to be a coffee shop, it's going to be that, it's going to be that. And it's great, and I can see the ambition, and you can see the potential, and you say, like, opportunities arise that you weren't expecting. Also, sometimes barriers do, and of course, we've got to be very careful not to be promising stuff that we're really totally reliant on the commercial viability to deliver. I mean, you go back 30 years and people are saying, we're going to provide a laundrette. And of course, in reality, everyone bought a washing machine, no one wanted it, and the few people who did want it got very upset that laundrette never came along. We're not going to do that in Manydown, but I think we've just got to be a bit careful about, these are some of the ideas we've got and some of the hopes we've got, but let's not promise things that we can't deliver. We're relying on others to deliver. Going back to that country park, and to, you know, abuse the pun, Councillor Lee planted the seed. It's really about responsibility. I don't care who owns it. It's about somebody is going to take responsibility, and I think there's always a concern that a thing like this, and we should have started the country park a decade ago, really, to establish the trees and things, but your 15-year-old tree is really quite nice and very pretty and very attractive, and your 25-year-old tree is now that much bigger, and its roots are ripping up the access road, and the lights, the street lights are blocked by the leaves, and nobody wants to cut it back. No one wants to take ownership. So it's that having whoever in the long term is going to be responsible, having a say, because what you don't want to do is get to a point in 15 years' time when Urban and Civic have done their work, very proud of it, want to walk away, and Hampshire County Council, we're not touching that. Those trees are 5 years away from costing the taxpayer a fortune. So it's that kind of conversation that I just think sometimes I've got every confidence you want to build something fantastic and make something or grow something fantastic. Just think there's a bit of a long-termism. Those children who Rebecca took over there, they're going to pick up the tax bill for whatever you create if it doesn't become cost neutral. And we've got to do well for them as they're taking such a keen interest. So just more thoughts and questions, really.
Excellent, thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Compton-Burnett.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. That was really interesting, and I'd like to echo Councillor Lee's comments about the engagement. The residents really do appreciate that, and so do we, so thank you. I wanted to ask about community centres again, picking up on Councillor James's comment about creating something that first you don't promise what you can't deliver, but also that whatever you do deliver is sustainable. I think it's very important that we have discussions about the community facilities as early as possible, because they're only sustainable if they work for the community, and that takes a lot of thought. so that they are facilities that can be well used. I think we're all aware of some community facilities that aren't well used, and there are often very good reasons for that. And I want to make absolutely certain that whatever we built for the community will work for that community. So I wanted to ask, when will we be able to start discussing what those facilities will involve? And that will include the community hub, because whatever we have in the rest of the Manydown needs to work with that hub. It's not an isolated thing that just operates alone. And the same goes for the sports facilities in the schools. When will we know where they will be and start being able to talk about what they will offer to the community they serve?
Thank you for the question. I mean, I would start perhaps by just saying that, in response to both comments, really, I wouldn't be concerned about our realism around what it takes to achieve things and what's required to make some of the things we're discussing happen. But equally, I don't think you ever find us wishing to dent or dim our enthusiasm for what can be done and what we want to do here. So in our minds, we are rightly ambitious in what can be done at Manydown, and we want to remain that way for its delivery. Because obviously the proof will show in the coming years. But turning back to the community building, I think in many ways some of the early conversations around how that works, how that sits within the master plan, certainly internally, I can say there's been an extensive conversation, and also the work in particular of Rebecca and the community in terms of establishing, creating those relationships and understanding the needs and the requirements, that has begun for the last year or so. And I think as we move into the coming stages of the development, the more formal process of consultation on the community buildings can begin. But I would actually say, I mean, in many ways, Rebecca, I think that work is very much underway already.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's kind of the more formal conversations with yourselves and those community groups, and the Connected Communities team. So I spent kind of an afternoon on site with that team a couple of weeks ago, and we've had other conversations with them prior to that. But it was great to actually take them to the site and give them that idea of this is where we foresee the hub being, and kind of taking their ideas on board, because they're at that ground level, they know the users of all of the halls in the local area, and so we could get some really good facts there, and the other groups that we've been meeting all along, as well as things like we've already been talking to kind of rugby teams and scouts and hockey teams, and people have started to come to us and give us information on what they feel they're going to need, and so we can start kind of building the picture of how we can build somewhere that everyone gets to enjoy and use, and as you say, we maximise the value it brings to the community, and also to the development.
Thank you. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Chair. Well, just on that subject, I'm just intrigued. How much, and I haven't seen it and read it, maybe it's my fault for not doing it, in the 106 agreement that you signed, how much is dictated about the provision of all of the community facilities, sports facilities? How prescriptive is it in your view, or someone else to answer it?
I guess it's a subjective, your view on how prescriptive it is, but it certainly establishes in sort of sufficient terms what is required. So the extent of sports playing fields, the indoor sports hall, the tennis courts, muggers, open space, all these things are captured within Section 106. The detail and the specification in terms of the build, that is detail which come forward at reserved matters, but the principles are very much captured in the 106.
Just supplementary.
Of course, timing.
Sorry. Thank you for that. So, Councillor Compton-Burnett, were you involved as a ward member in any of this? Is this the first you were aware of?
It's lots of it's in the plans, so I have read about it.
You've read about it, but you weren't necessarily consulted. So just picking up your concern of what's going to happen.
My concern was more that my understanding is that the the information that we read a while back, so when we had all the coloured documents and there was an indicative plan in there and it said, and this is what the sports hub will look like, etc., etc. My understanding is that was illustrative, and there have been changes since then in terms of the location. And I just wanted to make sure that when they're deciding where the location is, and also exactly what each of those buildings that's shown on there is going to include, that we're all involved in a timely fashion. I don't think you're quite at that stage yet from what you said, but certainly I feel that the residents and the councillors are being involved in the initial discussions. I just want to make sure that we continue that way.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, there comes a time when we do need to know exactly what these community facilities are going to be, and there's nobody better than our three councillors. They've really got their finger on the pulse of what's needed. Yeah, Councillor Isaac.
Not wishing to bounce our joint venture partners into anything, but one of the things that you might like to consider is a workshop with these councillors in relation to the countryside park, particularly in terms of community facilities, because these people they're elected and they know what their electorate are looking for. So I think that if that's something you were prepared to host, that would be a good thing to do.
Absolutely welcome.
Did you hear that? You did? Oh, good. Sounds like a great idea. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Compton-Burnett again.
Thank you. Just going back to something we were discussing just now about where I had where we'd had some information about community facilities. What I was talking about was information that came out in about 2019, where we had a lovely plan with lots of sort of trees shown and buildings and schools and that sort of thing. And I understand that there have been a lot of changes in terms of the layout. And it would be really helpful if we could see an up-to-date version of the layout as you think it might well be. I know that there's a lot of things will change, but I keep being asked by residents, what does it look like? Where are the things going to be? And so where you know or have a fairly good idea, it would be great to see what that is so that we can show people and explain, yes, there will be changes, but this is where we are at the moment.
No, absolutely. We'd be very happy to, particularly when we meet to discuss community buildings, to review those elements. I mean, one of the things which is worth reminding everybody is that the reason why we have the tiered planning consent with the idea that the information for the scheme comes forward in ever-increasing levels of detail is to reflect that the periods of time which Manydown will come forward over are incredibly long, and enabling an ability to be dynamic and responsive is how the structure works. So at the outline stage, a set of parameters, that's what the parameter plans provide for, is that those are effectively a set of fixes which are elements which are key to the scheme and secured. Now, they can obviously be changed over time through a process, but actually they provide a bit of a North Star. I think the level of detail you're seeking and people want is the first phase application, at which point something quite tangible where a definition of an area is set, a regulatory plan sets out within it its contents and what's coming forward. I mean, in many ways the components are dictated by the conditions in the Section 106 because it provides timing what is required. But actually, as you say, the design and the layout is what most people are interested in. So we know the phase application is the one which we will be out there consulting on, engaging with the community on, because that is the detail we know everybody is hoping to get to. And detail, frankly, we are keen to progress to actually finalise those plans also so that we can have that conversation.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. You just mentioned there about the kind of the more detailed application. Now, I know that we're working with the three phases that need to be done before we can hit that stage, with phase one looking at July. Do we have any rough timeline as to when you're planning on submitting that application? Like, is it going to be this year, or are we likely now next year?
I'm wondering whether I'm going to hold Barry out to dry in this meeting or not. I think certainly at the moment our focus is on completing the suite for the site-wide with a view they go in July, and that's partly to sort of effectively create the headspace amongst the design team to say, right, that's submitted now, can we return to a master plan, which we have been working with since 2016 and developing, and it has evolved and new ideas have come along, and I think that will continue. I think what's been quite useful over the last year or so is the fact that we've had more access to stakeholders to test key elements which allow us to make fixes, because there are technical elements which you need to enable you to then develop from. Barry was referring to earlier on, that with establishment of access junctions and levels, it then design a cut and fill model for earthworks is able to be produced, and all this sort of cascade of detail can happen. So that work is work we really want to get our heads back into following submission in July of the site-wide frameworks. Ideally, we complete that work this side of Christmas with a view that it's submitted, because we want it approved in short order so we can actually start delivering it. If it rolls over, forgive me, but the target is this side of Christmas.
Can I just ask a supplementary to that as well? Obviously, we're aiming for July. What's the backup plan if July's not hit? What's the next or plan B?
I think they're actually discrete pieces of work. So the submission almost of the site-wide frameworks it's a precondition to approval of the phase. So actually, I know that in many ways the work is drawing to a close in terms of completing the drafting. So the plan is to complete the work, team, turn to phase. There is in this particular case, I don't think there's a need for a plan B. The plan is just to complete and move on.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments? No? Could I just add my own thing? First of all, Councillor Isaac suggested to get together with the ward councillors to discuss community facilities, which would be fantastic. Could I just suggest that maybe in the future we might even have this gentleman who looks like Bill Oddie, Paul Chester, who's your ecological expert. And he does look encouragingly expert, and we've got a lot of very sort of interested people really interested in these sort of matters. I mean, we all know Paul Beavers, don't we? And I just think they will be really encouraged to see some of the expertise that's going into green corridors and all these other things that are going on in North Manydown, especially obviously as a lot of these people are in the South Manydown area. But I just think they will be really encouraged to know what's going on up here in North Manydown. So maybe in the future, perhaps not too distant future, we might be able to have some sort of a presentation or workshop that we could invite the public to, so that they can be reassured that Basingstoke is onto this, because they often feel that we're not, to be honest, if that's okay.
I think it's an excellent idea, and not only does Paul Chester look the part, but actually he's one of the most engaging and interesting people I've met. So I think people will find that a really interesting event.
Well, I was just going to add that we did actually do a site tour with Paul Beavers and Paul Chester, and they got on really well. And I think Paul Beavers went away feeling quite heartened that Manydown was in good hands with our Paul Chester, who we call Charlie bizarrely. But yeah, he really is a character, and definitely I would love to bring him along and introduce him to you guys.
Well, I have to say, he went on the site, and I came away, I was all inspired by his knowledge.
Excellent, so we can all be inspired by him. Just one other thing, I want to add my commendation to you, Rebecca, because I think the communication is really good. As you know, I've joined the Facebook group and the Twitter group, and I've got this, and I've seen it online, and there's so much going on to tell us about everything. The one thing that for me is slightly missing is people get terribly worried very, very quickly when they see any activity. I'm sure that'll change when the houses are actually going up. But just at the moment, everything that happens, I'm being asked, what's happening on Worthing Road? What are they doing there? And, you know, there's big fences that have gone up. Somebody got very worried because they could see a deer, couldn't get through. Well, I'm sure Paul is onto that. But and some of the stuff that's been going on site-wide, and obviously I know about the archaeological things, but is there any way that maybe you could just put on Facebook, if you see this, this is what's happening? Because information is absolutely key, and people accept whatever they know. But if they're not told about it, it's like having a hold up in the road.
Yeah, definitely.
If you don't know what it's for, you get cross with it. If you know it's for vital work being done, then you're happy with it. So would it be possible just to put some of that sort of day-to-day information up so that people know what's going on?
Absolutely, yeah, no, and I think as the kind of our numbers increase, then, and obviously very much encourage all of you to follow us and share the information where you can, because I think we're trying to get out there and put the information on those on that kind of activity. But yeah, at the moment numbers are relatively, they're growing, but they're still quite low on Facebook and Twitter. And we're also obviously trying to use the website too. But no, very happy to take that on board. And sometimes it feels like maybe you're doing it too much, but the rule generally is you can't tell people too often or too much what you're doing. So I shall take that on board.
That's brilliant, thank you. I mean, I know obviously you want to be encouraging and upbeat, but sometimes people just need to know. Are there any other questions or comments before we finish? Make sure you've all said what you want to say. Councillor Lee.
Maybe just a bit of a recommendation on that, because as ward councillors we do get regular feedback from Rebecca. I don't know whether it'd be worth her sending that round to the committee as a group, because we're all different wards, and like I said, for you over in Oakley, it's people driving past that won't necessarily, look for the Manydown site per se, but they will contact you directly. So I don't know whether if we share the mock email with you and all.
Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, I think we've probably run out of questions and comments, which is great. Thank you for all that you said. I mean, I'm very confident that Bernie has got it all down. But just a little summary is that we've obviously had questions about integrating the park into Haram that we need to look at. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. I think everybody has the work programme in front of them. Given this is a new cycle of the committee, again, we've put forward as officers the programme of work over the next 12 months. If there are particular areas that members are interested in or want to focus in, then please let us know, and then we can consider how we factor that into the forward programme. I mean, as a general, we come forward with an update report. There are particular topic areas that will begin to emerge. I think this evening's been helpful to begin to tease those out, whether those are through separate workshops that we then report back into this as a formal committee. But like I said, accordingly. But if there are any...
Yeah, just zoom in terms of detail, but I just think if we often, I know my personal view is that, and road design, and so if we could have a look at that, it's between meetings, if we're going to do that sort of pre-scrutiny bit, we should have a look.